Welcome to the configuration video of 802.1x protocol on IC 6000, Infranet Controller 6000. In this particular video we are going to see how can we go ahead and configure 802.1x protocol on an IC series. This is going to be the case study which we are going to follow throughout this video. We need to configure 802.1x for authentication using a radius server. In this particular topology, this EX4200 series switch is basically acting as an authenticator. Then we have the IC series connected to the EX series 4200 series switch, which is basically acting as an infranet controller, and it is also a radius server. The IP address of the infranet controller is 10.0.5.1/24. The IP address of the EX4200 series switch is 10.0.5.26/24. On the other hand, we have the host connected on GE0/0/22. This port is going to be configured as 802.1x enabled port, and this particular host is basically acting as a supplicant for 802.1x protocol itself. Let's go ahead and see how we can go ahead and configure 802.1x on Infranet controller as well as on EX4200 series switch. The first step which we need to configure is we need to go to the EX4200 series switch and we need to enable 802.1x on the EX series switch. So let's go ahead and go see how we can configure the EX switch for radius authentication. This is the switch parameter. This is the switch configuration area where I am sitting currently. I just need to go to configure, and the configure I just need to go to security. Under the security hierarchy I need to go to 802.1x configuration. The very first element which I need to configure over here is the radius server itself. So just go to the radius server area, click on this particular icon and go ahead and add the IP address of the radius server. The IP address according to the topology of the radius server is 10.0.5.1. Then we have to configure a secret key. I'm putting the secret key as Juniper. Just go ahead and reconfirm your secret key, Juniper, and the port number on which the IC is listening for the radius authentication requests is 1812. Rest of the things you don't need to configure, or if you want to configure you can go ahead and specify a source IP address, a retry attempt and a timeout value. After this, just go ahead and wait for the delivery of the configuration to the switch itself from the web UI. Click OK to continue. Basically, we have configured this switch as a radius client. The next step which we need to do on this particular switch is we need to go to that particular port on which we want to enable the 802.1x. According to the topology, we have to enable it on GE0/0/22. So just click on this particular port GE0/0/22 and go to the edit area and click 802.1x configuration. It will go ahead and ask you, do you want to enable 802.1x with default parameters on the selected ports? Click yes. Then you have to specify the supplicant mode. There are multiple modes available for supplicant for 802.1x configuration. Currently we are going to follow the single mode which will allow multiple hosts with first host authenticated. Click OK, or if you want to configure the authentication parameters, go ahead and specify the re-authentication timeout value. Okay, just go back to the supplicant mode and click OK and wait for the delivery of configuration to the switch from the web UI. Click OK. Your configuration to enable 802.1x on EX4200 series switch is complete. Now we need to go ahead and jump onto the IC itself, Infranet controller itself. This is the web UI of Infranet controller. Okay, what we need to configure over here, we just need to go to UAC and then we have to go to the network access. Under the network access we need to go to the location group. Here we'll go ahead and configure a new location group. Currently there is a existing group available, we will just go ahead and disconnect, or we will just delete this particular thing. Okay, anyway, you cannot delete it because it is being used in some other policies. So we'll use the existing unified access switches as the default location group. After that, we need to add the radius client. The radius client is going to be the EX4200 series switch on which we just enabled the radius server parameters. So just click on this new radius client, specify a name EX4200. Okay, put any description, then specify the IP address. The IP address according to the topology of the EX4200 series switch is 10.0.5.26. IP address range, you can specify the number of IP addresses for radius client, then go ahead and specify the shared secret key which we have configured on EX4200 series switch as Juniper. Okay, then you can go ahead and specify what is the vendor for your radius server. Okay, we are going to use the standard radius, and then you have to specify the location group. This is the same location group which we just saw in the configuration. Click save changes and you are ready to go. So your radius client is configured as an EX4200 series switch on the infranet controller itself. After this step, what we need to configure, we again need to go to the UAC, and then from UAC we need to go to the radius attributes. This is the place where we'll go ahead and configure a policy to enable the 802.1x functionality on the infranet controller itself. We'll go ahead and click the new policy. Okay, here we can go ahead and specify a user defined name for this policy. So I will go ahead and type the name as my policy. Okay, put a description for your configuration, and then you have to select that this policy is going to be used by which location group. We already have an existing location group as UAC switches. So we'll just go ahead and add this particular group to the policy. After that, we have to specify what we need to push from the radius server if user is trying to authenticate or device is trying to authenticate itself. Just go to VLAN and specify I want to assign a VLAN of 510. This is the ID of the VLAN. Okay, then we have an option of specifying the filter ID or different values. We are going to currently use only the filter ID. Then you can go ahead and specify on which roles you want to apply this particular policy. This policy applies to all roles, or this policy applies to a selected role. Currently I am just going to apply this particular policy on my NAT admin roles. Click this and click your save changes. So these were the configuration steps which we have to follow to configure 802.1x on an infranet controller and as well as on the EX4200 series switch. The final configuration of the topology will be looking like to this. You have the protocols on the switch itself. Okay, under the protocols you have .1x, then you have a specified the authenticator, authentication profile name as my profile. Okay, this is the interface on which we have enabled the 802.1x as a single supplicant mode, and this is the place where we have configured the re-authentication time value as 3600 seconds. Same thing when you configure the EX4200 series switch, it has the under the access hierarchy, it has the radius server IP address as 10.0.5.1 as well as the port number as 1812 and your secret key, and this is the name of the profile which you just saw under the added protocols hierarchy. This is the profile which has the authentication order as radius, okay, and the IP address of radius server as 10.0.5.1. I hope this has been informative for you guys, and I would like to thank you for viewing.